What if everything you thought about love was just an illusion? No, this is not a line from a romantic movie, but rather the idea that Baruch Spinoza, a 17th-century philosopher, suggested with his logical and disenchanted vision of feelings. Today, love is seen as something ideal, a noble emotion, a dream shared by millions of people, but according to Spinoza, love is nothing but the reflection of a personal need, an inevitable impulse, not a heroic gesture of freedom. This perspective may be uncomfortable, but it is undoubtedly enlightening. Think about this. We are constantly obsessed with the idea of true love, with the search for that special someone. We are convinced that love is a magical mystery that arises from nothing, but Spinoza dismantles this belief without hesitation. For him, love is something simple. We feel attracted to what benefits us, what strengthens us, and what makes us happy. Not exactly romantic, right? But much more realistic than we would like to admit. Before delving into this vision, however, it is essential to know the man behind these ideas. Baruch Spinoza was not just any philosopher. He was exiled, misunderstood, and even feared. The reason? His way of thinking went against everything that was considered sacred at the time. He did not believe in a personal God. He rejected religious dogma, and perhaps even more shocking, he maintained that every aspect of reality was governed by rational laws, even love. But what exactly does it mean to consider love as part of a rational system? Imagine analyzing every emotion until it is reduced to its essential mechanisms. Spinoza did not want to deny love, but to understand it. For him, every feeling, even the most elevated, has a cause and an explanation. Isn't it disturbing to think that what we feel for someone is just a logical, almost mechanical reaction to what that person represents to us? If you've ever wondered why we fall in love with some people and not others, Spinoza had an answer. And it had nothing to do with fate or magic. According to him, we are drawn to what increases our capacity to exist, what makes us feel stronger and more complete. Love, then, is not a conscious choice, but the inevitable consequence of who we are and what we need. And if this idea seems cold to you, wait, because we are only at the beginning. Today we tend to glorify love as the highest expression of freedom, as if we were the ones who chose who to love. But Spinoza would have laughed at this idea. According to him, our decisions are not as free as we think. Our every desire and action is conditioned by our nature and the circumstances in which we live. So when we fall in love, it is not because we chose to do so, but because that person responds almost perfectly to the needs that we carry within us. This vision is uncomfortable because it takes away all our illusions, and when it comes to love, who is really willing to give up their illusions? Yet perhaps understanding Spinoza's point of view leads us not only to discover truths that are difficult to accept, but also to develop a new way of appreciating our feelings. If love is not a mystery, but rather a manifestation of our very nature, doesn't it become even more fascinating? Think about it for a moment. If love is not a matter of chance or fate, what does that mean for our relationships? Does it free us from unrealistic expectations or condemn us to a suffocating determinism? This is the great contradiction that Spinoza forces us to face. Love is inescapably tied to our nature, yet remains profoundly human in its quest for fulfillment. But then, what is love really? Is it a sublime feeling that elevates us above our nature, or is it just a disguised need, a deception of the mind to ensure our survival? Spinoza had a clear answer, and you probably won't like it. In this video, we will explore his perspective and discover how his life influenced his thinking. Most importantly, we will see how his vision challenged everything we still believe about love today. Now stop for a moment and think, how many of your ideas about love could be just illusions? As you discover Spinoza's thought, you may find yourself questioning everything you've ever believed. For this, leave a like from now so you don't forget to do it at the end. Write in the comments what you think as you follow the video. Do you agree, or does this vision of love seem too extreme? And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because once you start seeing the world through different eyes, you will never want to stop. Be prepared to question not only your relationships, but your deepest emotions, because once you understand Spinoza's thoughts on love, you may never see it the same way again. To understand how Spinoza arrived at his radical conception of love, we must know his story. Baruch Spinoza was born in Amsterdam in the year 1632 into a Sephardic Jewish community. From a young age, he began to question everything: religion, authority, tradition. He did not do it out of simple rebellion, but out of a deep need for truth. His is not the story of a philosopher isolated in his study, far from the world. On the contrary, Spinoza experienced firsthand the price of free thought. At the age of 23, he was expelled from his community. Imagine being rejected not only by his family, but also by his social environment. His ideas were considered dangerous, even heretical. He did not believe in a personal God who intervened in the lives of human beings. For him, divinity was not a separate being, but coincided with the entire natural order of the universe, and it is precisely here that we find the first clue to his vision of love. If everything that exists is governed by immutable laws, why should love be an exception? Spinoza saw the universe as a perfect system, in which every event happens for a precise reason. There was no room for chance or miracles. And this was also true for feelings. What we feel is not an inexplicable mystery, but a logical reaction to what surrounds us. But his life was not just theory. To support himself, he worked polishing lenses. A profession that required precision and that, in a certain sense, reflected his thinking. Each lens he built offered a clearer vision of reality. Likewise, his ideas sought to bring order to the chaos of human emotions. This aspect is fundamental. Spinoza did not speak from the height of an ivory tower, but from the experience of a marginalized man, who found in reason his only refuge. He lived in an era marked by religious wars and fanaticism. Yet he did not allow himself to be carried away by extremism. His goal was to understand, and in this search for understanding he came to the conclusion that everything, including love, was part of a natural order. For him, to love was to recognize what strengthens us, what drives us to continue to exist. His vision of the world profoundly influenced his idea of love. If the universe is a network of causes and effects, then love is also part of it. It is not an exception, it is not a whim, but a cog in this perfect mechanism, and that is precisely why his philosophy seems so disturbing. By eliminating the mystery from love, he also eliminates the illusion of control. While other philosophers spoke of soulmates and high passions, Spinoza spoke of necessity, not because he despised love, but because he considered it a reflection of our deepest essence. Isn't it ironic? A man who lived alone, far from his community, was perhaps the one who described love with the greatest clarity, and his story teaches us something else fundamental. You can't challenge dominant ideas without paying the price. Spinoza paid with isolation, but he never abandoned his search for truth. In his most important work, Ethics, he set forth his vision of a world in which everything is interconnected. A world where every action has a cause, and every emotion has an explanation. This book is not just a philosophical treatise but a window into his mind, and it is here that we understand why his conception of love is so unique. For Spinoza, loving is not an act of will, but of understanding. The more we know someone, the more we love them. Not because we choose it, but because our nature pushes us toward what we recognize as positive for our existence. This idea comes from a man who, despite living far from others, was able to understand love in its purest essence. But there is another interesting aspect. His life reminds us that revolutionary ideas never arise from conformism. Spinoza challenged the beliefs of his time because he knew that critical thinking requires sacrifices, and his philosophy challenges us because it demolishes the illusions to which we are most attached. Including the myth of love as something inexplicable, understanding his life means understanding his philosophy, and understanding his philosophy means confronting an uncomfortable truth. Love is not a miracle but a consequence, and once you start seeing it that way, there is no going back. What is love, according to Spinoza? If you have always thought that love was a gift of fate or a magical spark between two people, Spinoza would force you to reconsider everything. For him, love is not a coincidence or an inexplicable emotion. On the contrary, it is a natural manifestation of who we are and what we need. This vision may seem cold, but it is undoubtedly fascinating. In his work Ethics, Spinoza defines love as a form of joy accompanied by the idea of an external cause. In simpler words, we love what makes us happy and which we perceive as something external to us. But here comes the crucial point. This happiness is not accidental. It comes from what strengthens our existence, from what makes us feel more alive. If something or someone makes us feel good, we inevitably love it. Not by choice, but by nature. This idea is based on a fundamental concept in Spinoza's philosophy, the conatus. With this term, the philosopher describes the effort or impulse that every being has to persevere in its existence. Everything in nature, from a stone to a human being, tends to maintain itself and grow. For us, this impulse is not only physical but also emotional. We seek what is good for us, what enriches us and elevates us, and love, according to Spinoza, is exactly this, the feeling of joy we experience when we find something that strengthens our essence. Think about it for a moment. We don't fall in love with someone because we want to, but because that person satisfies a need that already exists within us. Have you ever felt drawn to someone who inspires you, motivates you, or makes you feel more like yourself? For Spinoza, this is not a coincidence. It is the inevitable result of our nature. But there is an even more uncomfortable aspect. If we love what makes us feel good, what happens when it stops making us feel good? According to Spinoza, the feeling vanishes. Love, being a logical reaction to our environment, is neither eternal nor immutable. It changes with us and our circumstances. This concept goes against the romantic idea of eternal love. For Spinoza, there are no promises that can withstand changing conditions. Not because we are cold or selfish, but because our very essence pushes us to seek what keeps us happy and balanced. And if something no longer does us good, our love inevitably dies. But his vision is not just pessimism. Spinoza believed that by understanding the causes of our feelings, we can achieve a deeper and more authentic love. A love that is not based on illusions, but on mutual understanding, not on the simple idealization of the other, but on the recognition of mutual needs and strengths. This kind of love, according to him, is rare, but possible. It requires an awareness that goes beyond simple momentary passion. It is not nourished by unrealistic expectations, but by the acceptance of the other for what he or she really is. And here, Spinoza makes an interesting observation. True love is not blind. On the contrary, it is fully aware. We do not love because we ignore the other's defects, but because we understand their true essence and accept it. This kind of love does not fear change because it is not based on ephemeral illusions. It is based on mutual knowledge and rationality. Another curious aspect is that, for Spinoza, the more we know someone, the more we can love them. Ignorance generates fear and rejection, while deep understanding creates stronger bonds. In other words, love is not born from mystery, but from knowledge, a concept far removed from the modern romantic idea which exalts the unknown and the unpredictable. Spinoza also tells us that although love is an inevitable consequence of our nature, we can learn to cultivate it. Understanding our emotions better helps us make love more lasting, but this requires commitment and awareness. It means knowing yourself, understanding the other, accepting your limits, and working together to grow. So what is love according to Spinoza? It is the reflection of our survival instinct, a manifestation of our need to exist and thrive. It is not a mystery or a miracle. It is, in its purest essence, a consequence of what we are, and although this vision may seem less poetic, it is perhaps even more human, because in the end, to love is to understand, and understanding is the highest form of freedom we can achieve. Love as a need and not as a choice. Imagine if you were told that every emotion you feel, even the most intense love, is not a free choice, but only the reflection of an internal need. Sounds strange, right? Yet this is exactly what Spinoza thought. For him, love is not an act of will, but an inevitable consequence of our nature. We do not love because we want to, but because we are driven to do so. All this arises from his vision of the world, based on a mechanical and rational order. According to Spinoza, the universe works like a perfect machine. Each of its elements, including our emotions, responds to a precise need. A river flows towards the sea because it is in its nature to do so. Similarly, we love because our being pushes us to seek what is good for us. Let's take a simple example. When you are hungry, you look for food, not because you choose it, but because your body needs it to survive. For Spinoza, love works exactly the same way. We look for people who give us happiness, stability, or growth because our nature requires it. It is not a conscious decision, but an automatic response. This idea destroys one of the most widespread myths about love, that of freedom. We like to think that we can choose who to love, that we are the ones who decide. But Spinoza says the opposite. Love is like a reflection in a mirror, inevitable and conditioned by what we are. Does this mean that love is selfish? Not necessarily. Spinoza did not believe in selfless love because every form of love arises from an internal need. We love because we find in the other something that completes us, something that helps us to maintain our balance and to grow. But for him, this was not a negative aspect. On the contrary, he considered it a fundamental truth of our existence. And here comes an uncomfortable question. If love is a need, what happens to the idea of unconditional love? For Spinoza, unconditional love is just an illusion. Not because we are incapable of loving deeply, but because every love depends on the conditions that generated it. And when these conditions change, the feeling also changes. It may seem like a cynical view, but in reality it frees us from many unrealistic expectations. Think about the relationships in your life. Why do we stop loving someone? Often because that person no longer gives us what we need. not because we want to stop loving them, but because our nature no longer finds in them the support that it once gave us. For Spinoza, this is not a moral error, but an inevitable process. However, there is an important nuance. Even if love arises from a need, we can influence the way we experience it. Spinoza believed that by better understanding our emotions, we can learn to manage them. Knowing that love is a necessity does not make it less valuable. On the contrary, it allows us to appreciate it for what it really is. Furthermore, Spinoza argued that recognizing the true nature of love gives us an advantage. We can analyze what we feel, understand our reactions, and ask ourselves if what we love is truly good for us. How often do we cling to relationships that make us suffer? For Spinoza, this happens when we ignore our own nature. To love is to seek what strengthens us. If something weakens us, it is natural for our love to die. This perspective forces us to reflect on our own experiences. Have you ever wondered why you are attracted to someone who seems so different from you? Spinoza would say that in reality, they are not so different. That person satisfies a need of yours, even if you are not always aware of it. And when that need disappears or stops being satisfied, the feeling fades. Spinoza also tells us something else important. Even if we cannot choose who to love, we can choose how to react to this love. We can let ourselves be carried away, or we can understand it and use it to grow. And this is precisely the most liberating part of his philosophy. Accepting that love is a necessity does not mean undergoing it, but living it with greater awareness. How many times have we said, "I cannot help but love you"? According to Spinoza, this phrase is more literal than we think. We do not love by choice, but because our nature requires it. And precisely for this reason, understanding our love allows us to live it in a more authentic and sincere way. True love, according to Spinoza. The idea of true love has been idealized for centuries. We have been taught to believe in a pure, unconditional love, capable of resisting any obstacle. But predictably, Spinoza also dismantles this belief. For him, true love is not the one that lasts forever without changing. On the contrary, it is that which arises from a deep mutual understanding. Spinoza does not deny the possibility of authentic love, but his concept is very different from the romantic one. According to him, true love is not based on blind passion or idealization of the other. It is based on rational understanding. In other words, we can only truly love when we understand what we love and why we love it. It is not a love that ignores the other's flaws. Rather, it is a love that recognizes and accepts them. For Spinoza, true love is free, but not in the romantic sense we are used to. It is not free because it chooses who to love arbitrarily. It is free because it does not depend on illusions or unrealistic expectations. It comes from the awareness of what the other brings into our life, not by a stroke of luck or a written destiny, but because our being recognizes a real value in that person. And this understanding, instead of making love less special, makes it stronger. But there is a key question. If love is a need, how can it be true? Spinoza's answer lies in knowledge. A love based only on desire or lack is fragile, but a love born of mutual understanding can last over time. Not because it is immutable, but because it adapts to changes. True love, according to Spinoza, is not eternal, because nothing in nature is, but it can be genuine as long as there is a sincere understanding between two people. Such love does not fear time or difficulties because it is not based on passing illusions. It is based on the ability to see the other for what he or she really is, and to accept him or her without masks. Spinoza also emphasizes another important aspect. True love is not possessive. If we understand that we love someone because they make us feel good, we also understand that that person does not belong to us. We do not love to control or to hold the other, but for the value we recognize in him. And this freedom, instead of weakening love, strengthens it, because it eliminates jealousy, unrealistic expectations, and inevitable disappointments. Does this mean that, for Spinoza, true love is cold or calculating? No, his idea is that the most authentic love is not the one that is guided by irrational impulses, but the one that is born from deep understanding. It is a love that knows why it loves. It is not perfect, but it finds value in the reality of the other, without the need for idealizations. But how do you build true love? According to Spinoza, only through a journey of personal knowledge. We cannot truly love someone if we do not know ourselves. Only by understanding our needs and our limits can we create relationships based on sincerity. True love, for Spinoza, is not a suffocating bond. It is not sacrifice or renunciation. It is a love in which both strengthen each other without losing themselves in the process. An interesting aspect is that, for Spinoza, true love is active, not passive. It is not something that simply happens, but something that is built with commitment and awareness. It is precisely this effort that makes it so valuable, but Spinoza also warns us of a great danger: illusion. When we idealize someone, we do not love the real person but a distorted image, and sooner or later that illusion shatters. For this reason, true love can only exist when we see the other for what he or she really is, without masks or unrealistic expectations. So, is true love possible according to Spinoza? Yes, but it is not what we see in the movies. It is not a love that promises eternity, but a love that guarantees authenticity. It may seem less romantic, but it is much deeper. Because loving with awareness, knowing exactly why we love, is an act of great courage, and for Spinoza this is where the true freedom to love lies. Spinoza forces us to look at love from a perspective that can be uncomfortable, but at the same time liberates us. He teaches us that love is not an inexplicable mystery, nor a whim of fate. On the contrary, it is a need deeply rooted in our nature. We love because we seek what strengthens us, what brings us joy and helps us exist. Although this vision may seem less romantic, it offers us something invaluable: clarity. After all that we have analyzed, an inevitable question arises. If love is an unavoidable need, can we have any control over it? Spinoza would say yes, but not in the way we imagine. We cannot choose who to love, but we can choose how to understand that feeling, how to live it, and how to let it transform us. And this is where the power of his philosophy lies. When we understand love, we stop being its victims. We no longer cling to illusions and are no longer afraid of change. We know that love, like everything in nature, evolves. To love, according to Spinoza, does not mean to lose oneself in the other, but to rediscover oneself through the other. So what is left for us after facing this uncomfortable truth? We are left with the possibility of loving honestly, without fear and without unrealistic expectations. We are left with the freedom to build relationships based on understanding and not on temporary illusions. And above all, we are left with the certainty that love, while being a necessity, can also become a conscious choice for growth and authenticity. Spinoza reminds us that true love is not the one that promises to last forever without effort. It is the one that is built day after day with understanding and respect. It is a love that does not fear imperfections because it accepts them as part of our nature. Ultimately, what makes love valuable is not its duration, but the willingness to understand and cultivate it. Think about it for a moment. If we stop idealizing love and start seeing it as a reflection of our essence, doesn't it become even more interesting? It is no longer a game of fate, but a mirror that shows us who we are and what we need. Spinoza invites us to look into that mirror without fear and to accept what we see. His philosophy pushes us to reflect on our relationships. Do we truly love the other, or do we project our expectations onto him? How many times have we confused the need for companionship with true love? Spinoza warns us that only by distinguishing these two things can we get closer to authentic love. And perhaps the most fascinating aspect of his thought is that he does not ask us to give up love. On the contrary, he invites us to embrace it with greater awareness. It tells us that love does not lose its beauty just because it is a need. On the contrary, it becomes even more human and real, because the moment we understand that we love for what the other gives us, we also learn to value it and reciprocate sincerely. According to Spinoza, love is not a prison, but an opportunity, a chance to grow, learn, and accept oneself. He shows us that there is no contradiction between loving and feeling free, because true freedom is not in ignoring our needs but in understanding and accepting them. Isn't it more liberating to know that we love not because someone has decided it for us, but because our essence demands it? And here Spinoza leaves us with a challenge. Can we love with awareness, knowing that love is neither perfect nor eternal, but still choosing to live it with sincerity? This is the true test, and perhaps also the greatest reward. Now it's your turn. After discovering Spinoza's thought, has your vision of love changed? Do you still believe in traditional romantic ideas, or has this philosopher questioned some of your certainties? Leave a comment to let me know what you think. If you found this reflection interesting, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss other content like this. Like if this video made you think, and share it with someone who, like you, wants to understand love from a new perspective. Because, as Spinoza would say, understanding is the most authentic form of loving. Thanks for making it this far. See you in the next video.